It's time to turn our attention to the Buffalo Bills Week 3 matchup against the Washington Commanders, and I'm joined by Locked On Commanders host David Harrison to discuss it today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This Crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use a promo code, all lowercase, LockedOnNFL, for a first deposit match up to $100. On today's episode, we're going to discuss what the Buffalo Bills and the Washington Commanders both have to do to come out of FedEx Field with a win on Sunday, and we'll discuss the key matchups and players coming up for Week 3 this weekend. But first, we are going to start with the biggest thing happening around each team before this game or leading up to this game. And Joe, in honor of all my buddies living in upstate New York from my time stationed at Fort Drum, I would like to say, let's go Buffalo first with the biggest story happening around your franchise that you cover up there in the great state of New York.
Good to be on with you, David. Excited to talk about this football game. I'm sure Washington fans are quite excited about the 2-0 start. And, obviously the Bills looking to stack wins. I think that's where the storyline for me is with the Bills. They're a pretty healthy football team. I feel like a lot of the dynamics that we expected to be in place have evolved nicely. Obviously, they bounced back really well from a kind of a goofy Monday night opener against the Jets into a dominant win over the Raiders. And so I think for this Buffalo Bills team, now that it feels like it's on track, that they bounce back, it's about stacking wins and starting to be the team you're supposed to be this season. 38-10 win over the Raiders is a good start to that, but it's about stacking wins. And obviously, you have a road date in Washington where you're favored by 6.5 as of the recording of this podcast. And it feels like an opportunity that the Bills need to seize, especially with what's happening the following week, which is a home date against the Miami Dolphins. And the Bills have won the AFC East 3 years in a row, but the Dolphins are certainly nipping at their heels. They feel like the biggest threat to the Bills in terms of repeating for a fourth time. And so it's about taking care of their business this week and not getting lost in what's happening next week. We know the NFL is a week-to-week league, and you can't not look ahead. That's what the key thing for the Bills this week is, going and taking care of your business and letting the Miami week be the Miami week and focus on a 2-0 Washington team that has a lot of talent.
Yeah, I mean, the popular phrase is trap game, right? And I think that every NFL fan base has kind of gone through situations where their team may be heavily favored in a matchup, and maybe there's a big matchup coming up next week. Like this week was the Cardinals for the Commanders. You got the Eagles in week 4, so that would be a trap game feel for the Washington Commanders. But this here is an opportunity for the Washington Commanders to really kind of make a statement to the National Football League that they are really a lot better than a lot of people expected them to be. Most people had this team at the bottom of the barrel, maybe selecting top 5 in the NFL draft, probably going after a new quarterback, maybe Sam Howell's best friend, Drake May, who's playing out at UNC. How awkward of a situation that would be if Drake had to come into this locker room and compete with Sam for a starting job. But that's really what was expected. Now, coming through week 2, the Arizona Cardinals game, not as clean as everybody wanted it to be. The Denver Broncos with the comeback and the first, underdog upset victory of the year. I don't know that it's enough to make people say, okay, the Washington Commanders could be for real, or at least, could be really competitive in the NFC East or the playoff picture. But at least people now, I think, have kind of a layer of respect around this team and their young players, especially their quarterback, and the resiliency, right? That's the message that Ron Rivera talked about, was resiliency. And honestly, I think that is the biggest story surrounding the Washington Commanders right now, because Sam Howell has obviously showed that resiliency, not just in these 2 starts this season, but you go back to his dropping all the way from being a first-round draft pick candidate to being a 5th-round draft pick candidate. I talked to him recently here this season about that whole thing and asked him about kind of his projections from the advisory board coming in. And he did acknowledge like the projections were a little bit all over the place, but they were definitely in the more day 2 range than they were the day 3 range. But then every team, and he didn't specify, but every team he thought might go after him ended up bringing in a new quarterback. Denver Broncos brought in a new quarterback the same year Sam Howell was drafted. I don't know that that's the team that he was talking about, but it could have been. So for him to get a win against that team, if they were, probably felt really good. But then you have, like, on the other side of the ball, a resilient Chase Young who has been through the ringer, I think, that of every professional player's dreams and nightmares. Defensive Rookie of the Year, followed up by 1.5 sacks through 8.5 games before tearing up his knee, having 2 knee surgeries, a delayed recovery from that, finally getting back healthy at the end of last year, a stinger in the preseason, finally gets healthy from that, and he blows up for a sack and a half in his first game, matching his last healthy season's output in one single game. So a lot of resiliency, Joe. And not only is this team going to need that resiliency against Buffalo, they're going to need resiliency and clean football, which hopefully will keep them from needing another fourth quarter comeback in week 3.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that about Sam Howell, and I think some of the best players at any sport are the ones that can really find that chip on their shoulders. And I think that's a good point with Sam Howell. I mean, I'm living in the draft space all the time. We started the mock drafts that year with him as a top 3, top 5 selection, and he falls to the 5th round in what was a really goofy quarterback class altogether. And so, you know, I think him being able to manufacture that, being able to work with Eric Bienemy taking over this offense, the offensive line has certainly looked good through two games at this point in the season. And so you have a team that feels like they're playing with a lot of motivation. There's certainly a lot riding with the new ownership in Washington. Everybody has to perform, right? Everyone's under evaluation. And so them being 2-0 at this point in the season puts them on track. That gives them confidence. And I'm sure that they're looking to validate, like you said, and make a statement and beat the Bills, right? You do that, you're no longer going to be questioned as a 2-0 team. You're going to be a 3-0 team that all of a sudden looks like they can make some noise in the NFC, which feels like a wide open conference. You certainly have the top guys, right? The 49ers, the Cowboys, the Eagles, they're all 2-0, but so are the Commanders and the Falcons and the Bucks, right? It feels wide open. And it's cool to see Washington have some success, and we'll see how it goes throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. We're having a fun, time getting right out the gates. We'll see which horses can kind of keep up with the front of the pack. I know when I did my regular season preview, I kind of went quarter at a time. In the first quarter, I told my listeners, I said, look, 2-2, that's par for the course. That's the minimum you should expect. You feel okay going 2-2 with this type of a schedule in front of you. They've already got the 2 wins. So anything after this, if you can get another one, whether it be from Buffalo, and again, you don't want to look ahead of anybody, but especially the Buffalo Bills. But if you can get a win against the Philadelphia Eagles, come out with a 3-1 record. 4-0 record, Joe, would I don't know. I don't know if the DMV could handle the Washington Commanders being 4-0 after the first quarter of the season. But anything after this is of course, is just a benefit for everybody involved. But of course, those storylines aren't going to be the only ones dominating Sunday. We've got key matchups and players to look for this weekend as the Buffalo Bills visit the Washington Commanders. That's coming up next on today's Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bills, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this Crossover Thursday episode of both Locked On Bills, Locked On Commanders, brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS, daily fantasy sports, because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros like Joe Marino and sharks like, I don't know, James Jarko, he's a lot better at this than I am. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And this week on Prize Picks, I'm doing a little Thursday night triple play of my own. That's my saying, not Prize Picks' saying. But I'm taking 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy for more than 222.5 passing yards, Giants tight end Darren Waller for more than 50.5 yards receiving, and 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey for more than 112.5 yards of total offense in what should be a 49ers win. But it's Thursday night football, so anything can happen. But I'm also keeping my eye on Prize Picks because they got weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide you even more value. And now they even have Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use a promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Today's crossover episode is also brought to you by the fact that you should never be caught unprepared, and Jace Medical is here to help you make sure you have 5 life-saving antibiotics on hand for emergency use if ever you should need them. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use, and all it takes to get your Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of Jace Medical's board-certified physicians. It's doctor-created, it's doctor-recommended, and everybody should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected, whether it's a natural disaster or simple travel issues. One Jace case user, Frank, said, quote, "Easy as 1, 2, 3, just in time. I received our package the same day I got a sinus infection and my doctor was out of town. No appointments for days. Thank goodness it arrived," end quote. So it doesn't have to be the apocalypse happening. Sometimes you just need to have the meds you need when you need them. Storms, shortages, pandemics, whatever it is, you need to be more prepared now more than ever before. The Jace case gives you peace of mind, and Jace Medical is making sure you have the medications you need in hand. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using the promo code Locked On at checkout at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Bills and Locked On Commanders your first listen today and every day, everydayers of both programs. We appreciate you all for joining us here for this crossover Thursday. And Joe, we've got a lot of matchups in this game, but coming from the Buffalo Bills side of things, which matchup to you is the biggest one coming up on Sunday?
Yeah, my mind goes right to this Commanders defensive line. Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Daron Payne, John Allen. We've talked for years about this group, all the first-round picks, the talent there. So far, these guys are looking pretty good through a couple of games. 10 sacks in 2 games. I mean, they're putting quarterbacks on the back. Obviously, you mentioned Chase Young already, him finally being healthy, coming through with a sack and a half. And so that's a tough challenge for any team. And the Bills obviously will have their hands full with this group. They did quite well last week against the Raiders and Max Crosby, but they don't have any other threats besides Max Crosby. And you go back to that Jets game and you feel like, all right, they were able to heat him up a little bit more. And obviously there's more talent on that Jets defensive line. And so this is a big test for the Bills offensive line. Obviously keeping Josh Allen upright and giving him time to operate is critical every single week. And you got a tough defensive line to deal with here that can get organic pressure. They can rush 4 and get home. They have guys that can win one-on-one. And so it's going to be a big test for the Bills, and obviously one of the most critical things if the Bills are going to come away with a win.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I actually just finished on Tuesday, dropped an episode that kind of did a deep dive of the Washington Commanders' 10 sacks and being first in the league in the NFL right now, tied with the Dallas Cowboys, and second in the league in sacks per pass attempt and all those things. And look, 7 of those came against the Denver Broncos. That's a very large sum to have in one game, so it's not quite an even split, but the addition of Chase Young hopefully is kind of what helped spark that increase in production. And if they can get a similar or same type of performance against Josh Allen, certainly will give the Washington Commanders an opportunity. I do know one thing: the Washington Commanders cannot come out of sleep on defense for the first quarter and a half the way they did in Denver, or else this thing might be ugly pretty quick. I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Typically we go players on these matchups, right? I'm gonna go Sean McDermott against Eric Bienemy. And Kansas City Chiefs fans have been kind of rallying for a long, long time that Eric Bienemy deserves to be an NFL head coach. And there's been people in the media and supporters of his out in the public to say Eric Bienemy should have been a head coach a long time ago. This opportunity in Washington is really kind of the first opportunity he's had to just, without a doubt, unquestioned, just be the man in charge of an offense that nobody can take away from him. I mean, he's got questions here, Joe, just last week about how was it to be a play caller on the sideline for week 1 in the NFL. And it wasn't meant as any type of a disrespectful question. And EB didn't take it that way, but he did come back and say, I've called plays before. You know what I mean? But that stigma and opinion or perception of him not being a consistent play caller is obviously carrying through with him, to this day, even in Washington. And if he can do what he's done in the first 2 weeks, both weeks, the Washington Commanders come out and they haven't necessarily been amazing on offense in either game. Did better against Denver, even in the first half, even though the point output wasn't all that great until maybe the middle portion of the second quarter. But in both those games, he came out in the second half, and the adjustments he made with his young first-year starting quarterback, Sam Howell, and able to get him more comfortable, get him more effective, and get the offense rolling a little bit better, those have been huge. And if he can do it, we talk about statement games. Obviously, the Washington Commanders want their respect. But if Eric Bienemy can come out and do this, and I'll even say they don't even have to necessarily win, to be honest with you, but if he can come out with a game plan that keeps the Commanders competitive and maybe makes this a one-score game, maybe a last possession game type of deal, even if they don't come out with a win, Eric Bienemy can make a lot of people swallow their tongues come this offseason when his name is brought up in head coaching conversations again.
Yeah, I love that dynamic of McDermott versus Bienemy, because Sean McDermott is now the defensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills after Leslie Frazier had a really good run. This is Sean McDermott's defense. And what's interesting in kind of reflecting over Sean McDermott against younger quarterbacks in the past is he seems to be pretty aggressive, willing to blitz and really just throw the kitchen sink at young quarterbacks. And what's interesting about that is the Bills have not been a blitz-heavy defense so far this year. Actually, I think third lowest blitz percentage in the NFL right now at about 11% of passing attempts sending pressure. Do they mix that up this week? Do they send more pressure at Sam Howell in his fourth NFL start and his third game with a new play caller? You can see them really trying to stress Sam and stress Eric Bienemy to have those built-in answers and for Sam Howell to make good decisions. And so I'm interested to see if this is kind of a game here for the Bills where they're a bit more blitz heavy than they were in their previous two outings this year with Sean McDermott as the defensive coordinator and, of course, the head coach.
Yeah, you know what, Joe? I'm so happy that you said that, because as we're sitting in the press box in Denver in week 2, as the Washington Commanders are orchestrating this comeback victory, I kept telling the media members sitting next to me, I said, why had the Denver Broncos not understood that giving Sam Howell 5 to 8 yards to throw every single first down is a terrible, terrible idea? Because all that ended up doing was giving Sam Howell and the Washington Commanders successful play after successful play on first downs, giving them second and shorts, manageables, third and shorts, and manageables. And that's what helped them stay or get back into that game. And I fully question and wonder, is Sean McDermott, because you don't have a lot of tape on Sam Howell, but if you watch Dallas, if you watch Denver specifically, you're going to see two defenses that were okay giving up the dink and dunks, right? Going back to the Bill Walsh days of coaching, and they got bit by it. They got beat by it. And I just look at it, and if I'm a defensive coordinator, which I'm not, but if I'm looking at Sam Howell and what this offense has been able to do, I'm bringing the house out. I'm saying, you know what? I understand that you can find the underneath stuff. I understand that if I give you 3 to 5 seconds, you're going to be able to find a guy open. But what if I give you 2 seconds? What if I give you 1.5 seconds? And that's why the most important player, Joe, because you said it, and now I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. Like, that's pretty much how my brain is going to work here. The most important player on the Commander side of things, left tackle Charles Leno Jr. Charles Leno Jr. is a veteran. He's a leader. He's a great dude in the locker room, great dude on the practice field. But I will tell you that he is about as hot and cold as a left tackle gets outside of Donovan Smith. When he is good, he's probably one of the most consistent tackles in the game. When he is bad, he is leaning forward on all fours on the ground, reaching for the pass rusher as he goes by him. There's not really a whole lot of middle ground with Charles Leno Jr. We saw some bad against the Denver Broncos. 2 of the 4 sacks that Sam Howell ended up having to eat were blamed on Charles Leno Jr., the majority of them, at least, if not the entirety of it. That is not something that Charles Leno Jr. can do against his Buffalo Bills defense, if, in fact, they do what I expect them to do, which is bring a lot more pressure on Sam Howell. Because, again, if you watch the Denver tape, you can see sitting back, trying to let him make his own mistakes is not going to work.
Another thing that I'm paying close attention to here matchup-wise is Emmanuel Forbes, first-round pick for the Washington Commanders, against probably a lot of Stefon Diggs. And I am not here to talk down on Emmanuel Forbes. I respect the heck out of the player, an absolute dog. Loved watching him at Mississippi State. He's like 166 pounds, but he doesn't know that, right? He comes up and tackles. He's got ball skills. He's a playmaker. And I'm excited for his career, but this is his third game, and he's going up against a really, really good player in Stefon Diggs, one of the premier receivers in the NFL. And I think that it's going to be a fun matchup to see how Steph plays against him, because the first couple of weeks he's faced a lot of big, long corners, and now that's not really the case at all with Emmanuel Forbes. And so how do the Bills go after that matchup? You have to think they're going to. I mean, even the collective Washington secondary, there's some veterans in there, of course, with Fuller, but there's a lot of youth even at safety, and with Benjamin St-Juste and his role in the defense. And so I'm interested to see how this Bills passing offense that is in year 6 of the scheme, how do they attack what I think is a pretty young overall Washington secondary?
Yeah, absolutely. Emmanuel Forbes is a guy that, he didn't get as many reps in the first week that I think a lot of fans wanted him to get, but Jack Del Rio, defense coordinator, has said a lot of it is going to be matchup based and a lot of it is going to be scheme based. And depending on what the Buffalo Bills bring, will depend on how the Washington Commanders decide to go after. But, Emmanuel Forbes is going to be embracing the opportunity to go up against one of the best receivers in the NFL when and if he gets the chance coming up Sunday. And if that goes right, then maybe the Washington Commanders can come out with a big upset win at home. oddly enough. But what has to go right for the Bills to make sure that doesn't happen? We're going to talk about that next on this crossover Thursday of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bills, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs, which Bird Dogs make you look good with their stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Plus, they fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton because Bird Dogs invented cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but it stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. On top of all the comfort, Bird Dogs also uses anti-stink sweat wicking fabric, which, guys, some of us all have to admit, and we know you need that sucker, right? That keeps you cool and dry all day long and smelling fresh where you need it the most. Bottom line is Bird Dogs are functional for any occasion. Whether you're hailing some Commanders or smashing through tables, Bird Dogs are going to make sure that you're comfortable and looking good doing it. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter the promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout to get a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle at checkout. You'll take that with you everywhere you go, and you're not going to want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise. Locked On Bills, Locked On Commanders, wrapping up this crossover Thursday episode ahead of Week 3. A big matchup happening here in FedEx Field in the DMV. I know Commanders fans are excited. Joe, I have not heard a lot of publication about the number of tickets sold for FedEx Field, and I know the Commanders are really excited to publicize all the numbers of tickets sold for Week 1. So it makes me a little bit worried that maybe the Commanders are seeing a lot of transactions coming from New York, zip codes, and the like. So we'll see. Buffalo Bills fans definitely travel well. Looking forward to the environment no matter what happens. But what has to go right from the Buffalo side of things in order for Bills fans to leave the stadium feeling good?
Well, David, I feel like it comes down to three things. Protecting Josh Allen. And so obviously the big challenge that we talked about in the opening segment about that Commanders defensive line against the Bills offensive line, you have to meet the moment. You got to win one-on-ones because there's not that many different ways that you can help, right? There's 4 different guys here that can get home. It's not Max Crosby and nothing else. This is 4 dudes. And so you're going to have to win one-on-ones. So that starts with the offensive line winning and protecting Josh Allen. I think it comes back down to from there is avoiding negative plays. Those guys are not just good pass rushers. They can get tackles for loss. You saw that over the first 2 games of the season. And so staying ahead of the sticks, not finding yourself in 2nd and long and 3rd and long and avoiding those negative plays, which also means not turning over the football. And so Josh Allen, a clean game against the Raiders, no turnovers, but everybody saw Monday Night Football, 4 turnovers. Josh Allen, you're going to see the statistic every week. Most turnovers in the NFL since whenever it was, 2018. Also the most touchdowns. Nobody wants to talk about that, but it's part of the deal. It comes down to taking care of your pass protection, avoiding the negative plays, and, of course, not giving the Washington Commanders the ball and taking care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the Washington Commanders side of things, we're going back to that resiliency, right? If you're a resilient person, that means you like to hang in when times get tough. Well, if you're going to be a resilient team, that means you got to hang in and not allow one play drives to end up with 60-yard touchdown passes. And that's what the Washington Commanders have to do against this Buffalo Bills team, is limit the explosives. For the offense, that obviously means you can't let Stefon Diggs get big chunk yards. You can't let, Dawson Knox, any of these guys, Josh Allen, break off a 20-yard run. You can't let any of those things happen. In the first half against the Denver Broncos, they allowed 5 explosive offensive plays for the Broncos offense, if I remember correctly. In the second half, outside the Hail Mary, which was ugly by itself, they only allowed 1, and that, again, was huge in that comeback effort. On the offensive side of things, right, what are explosive defensive plays? Big sacks, strip sacks, interceptions. You cannot turn the ball over. You cannot let the Buffalo Bills defense feel comfortable in your house. You got to keep them on their toes as best that you can. And if you do those things, you hang in this fight, again, the spread is what the spread is. But if you do all those things, then at the end of the day, in the fourth quarter, you should have an opportunity to come up with a big upset win. And, look, as measuring stick games go early on in the season, this is one of those matchups, Joe. I kind of wish they were both in the same conference because you would love to maybe see these two meet up again. If both make the playoffs, the Bills should, the Commanders might. You'd love to see these two in the postseason again, see what the differences are from week 3 to week, 19, 20, whatever it is, at the time they would face off. Obviously, that's not going to happen unless we see each other mid-February. But for week 3 in September, 6.5-point favorites for the Buffalo Bills. Joe, I don't know if you have a specific score yet, but do you have them covering the spread? Or you have them just winning the game?
Well, you didn't even give me an option where the Bills would lose the game. I think you're assuming that I'm going to pick the Bills to win it. You're correct about that. I do think that the Bills go into Washington and win this game. I think they've done a good job throughout the years of kind of their glow up as a top team in not looking ahead, right? They're very much week to week. They focus on their opponent. They respect their opponent. Josh Allen, I don't know if I believe him, but when he was doing Kyle Brandt's basement last year, he was always like, I don't know who we play next. Like, okay, buddy, you probably do, but they certainly do embrace that. And I think that they're not going to overlook Washington. Obviously, there's the relationship between Sean McDermott and Ron Rivera that, of course, is something, storyline in this game. But it's going to be an interesting football game. You mentioned some of the explosive plays they gave up in the first half against Denver. The Bills didn't necessarily have the explosive plays against the Raiders. Only one pass that was targeted more than 20 yards down the field. They were able to kind of stay patient and embrace that style of football. Will they do that against Washington? Will Josh Allen go out there and want to put the ball down the field? It's going to be an interesting opportunity to see what this football team looks like against Washington, because I think it presents just a really different matchup on both sides of the football than what we've seen in the first couple of weeks of the season. But I do think the Bills go into Washington, get a win. I have it at 27-17. I think they cover. But look, I'm not dismissing Washington. I think there's a path for them to win. I think they have the pass rush. If they can take away the football and really kind of just limit some of those big plays and win in the red zone, there's obviously a path for any team to win in the NFL. I'm not taking the Commanders lightly, but I do think the Bills take care of their business.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be alone on that. I know a lot of Commanders fans are anticipating what's going to happen. They're excited to see what happens in the future, but they do know that this game is going to be a very tough one for this organization to win right here, especially week 3. And I do think the Washington Commanders, like I said just a minute ago, week 3 Washington Commanders versus, say, week 13 Commanders are going to be two different teams. And hopefully health is on their side, and that helps them continue to develop. This is a team on the rise, I believe, but I don't think they're ready for a matchup like this one just yet, going up against the Buffalo Bills. And I do think that the Bills win this thing, but I'm going to go 27-21. So if you want to take the Commanders and the points at FanDuel, I believe that you'll probably be happy with that. I would probably stick to money line bets with this kind of thing, though. And unfortunately, if you're going money line, you're probably going Bills on that one. But I hope Locked On Commanders fans, listeners, everydayers, that I value being honest above all. So you kind of had to see that coming. So that's going to do it for today's Crossover Thursday episode. Locked On Bills, Locked On Commanders. Coming up, we've got at least one more episode to wrap up the week before this thing kicks off on Sunday. So make sure you come back for that. In the meantime, make sure you're following Joe on Twitter at the Joe Marino. Commanders fans, you heard Joe say it. Draft thing is kind of his thing. Even if you are not a Buffalo Bills fan, you should still be following Joe Marino again. So on Twitter at the Joe Marino. And you can find me at DHarrison82. Not as good of a Twitter follow, but I try. As always, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Thank you for coming back through on a consistent basis like you do for both shows. Thank you so much for making each of us part of your day, part of your football routine. Until we speak again, please be safe, be kind. We'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, Locked On Bills, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.